What tech job would let me get away with the least real work possible? Hey HN, I'll probably get a lot of flack for this. Sorry. I'm an average developer looking for ways to work as little as humanly possible. The pandemic made me realize that I do not care about working anymore. The software I build is useless. Time flies real fast and I have to focus on my passions, which are not monetizable. Unfortunately, I require shelter, calories and hobby materials. Thus the need for some kind of job. Which leads me to ask my fellow tech workers, what kind of job, if any, do you think would fit the following requirements? No, very little involvement in the product itself, I do not care. Fully remote, you can't do much when stuck in the office. Ideally being done in 2 hours in the morning then chilling would be perfect. Low expectations, vague job description. Salary can be on the lower side. No career advancement possibilities required. Only tech, I do not want to manage people. Can be about helping other developers, setting up infrastructure/deploy or pure data management since this is fun. I think the only possible jobs would be some kind of back-end only dev or DevOps/sysadmin work. But I'm not sure these exist anymore. It seems like you always end up having to think about the product itself. Web dev jobs always required some involvement in the front end. Thanks for any advice, or hate, which I can't really blame you for. This is an awesome question. I hope someone has good strategies for you. Life should be spent doing the things you find worthwhile, and the fact is, not all of those things are monetizable. Given how esteem and success-driven HN as a platform is. You might not get too many ideas, since I suppose people want to maintain their hireable status. Success and loving your job are more or less empty phrases unless you are actually a professional moving your field forward or learning a highly complex subject matter, or you own a stake in a company. Beyond that you are toiling, and if you like your job, it's glorious toiling like gardening, pleasing, but not important, but you love it, so it's great, or terrible toiling for living that eats your soul. I'm basically in a job that is quite important for my org. I get compliments for good job, but I hate most aspects of my daily work since the tech stack is complex and fugly. I probably appear motivated, but I'm just a neurotic who hates failing. If I didn't need to feed and house my family, I would have moved to a lower paying position long ago that is intrinsically more motivating. Success and loving your job have nothing in common in my experience. Greater than I'm basically in a job that is quite important for my org, I get compliments for good job, but I hate most aspects of my daily work. There's a class of crystallized intelligence jobs which are about what happened before rather than what you do today. There's an intersection between that sort of knowledge and a certain fluid intelligence to slot it in where things fit. I'm in one of those jobs right now, where the last 6 years of what I've read/absorbed is more valuable, as a sort of fast cross-reference in my brain, than what I actually do right now. I'm the guy with the picture that's on puzzle box, rather than having to place each puzzle piece. I've tried really hard to make myself obsolete, and do something else, but it has backfired spectacularly. I've written down all of this in documents, trained other people to do the same thing over the years, even built tools to replace the easy parts. Right now there's an intern doing the next pass of that automation, the effect of which has been to lighten my workload even more, and I'm not missed if need to take a couple of weeks on a road trip or something. To do this, I've had to do something which is not volume driven, i.e. my output is not a factor of time, so moved away from building web applications to profiling/optimizing all kinds of networked applications, where the ability to cut through the stack is useful, but for any given layer there's someone who does it professionally. This is of course not a long-term parking spot for me, but I'm useful and in essence acting as an elder store of information about the past and a slightly clearer view of the future. After 20 years of working and a sense of genuine burnout, I landed a dream job a few months ago where I'm doing tech leadership at a mid-size non-profit. We have a small familial team, a set of worthwhile and genuinely beloved public services and mission of doing good. There's still politics and revenue issues and all the sorts of stuff that go along with any company, but it's a lot less aggressive. Work-life balance and diversity are genuinely respected. I'm busy, but it's not crazy. In my past I worked on so many gigs for companies I didn't care about or downright disliked. Building tools to grab eyes or sell crap no one needed. Working somewhere with a positive mission is so much more valuable to me than working on a cool tech stack. Our stack isn't too bad, but we're not cutting edge either. I feel better about work than I have in a long time. And before anyone asks, no. We're not hiring. One trade-off is that it's a very slow growth environment. We don't have VC funds to burn and our business model is very mature. As someone who sympathizes with your comment, tech stack complex and fugly, and has made moves both ways in terms of salary, high to low for col -25%, then low to high again +50%, start with your requirements. Opt did a great job of saying here's what I need. Until that's staked out, you don't know what's too little, enough, and too much. But generally, minimizing and controlling costs, critically, through city choice, affords you flexibility. High costs equals must work high paying job. Low costs equals choice between working less, taking a job you enjoy more that pays less, or working more and saving. I'll probably switch back to a lower paying job in the next 6 months or year, because I'd rather work on something I love, and because I'll have the financial flexibility to do so. I'm surprised once again by the nice and helpful community on HN. I anticipated most comments would be people telling me to get my head out of my ass and get to work. I hope you find a way to chill through life. My job allows me to go backstage at Glastonbury and trackside visits at the Olympics, front seat views of royal weddings, orchestral pit on last night of the proms, and I have a fairly sedentary job of mostly pushing buttons. Colleagues have spent days in jungles building bridges to drive cars over them, have got to know people living in random villages from Afghanistan to Zimbabwe and share in their culture, have met and quizzed world leaders, have been to Antarctic bases, and have exposed and brought down criminal networks making lives miserable for thousands of people. I guess you'd define that as glorious toiling, but I could have 10 meters in the bank and never have to work again, but get to do very little of that. I think it says a lot about our society, that this comment is the most highly upvoted in a forum such as this. It's clear that if we decided to let everyone's basic needs of food, shelter, healthcare, and transport be met unconditionally, the world would look very different. It would not cost us much, maybe even less than we pay in taxes now, but I feel certain it would make everyone's lives significantly better. The lack of unnecessary stress and soul-destroying toil that anyone would be forced to endure is surely worth it. The only downside I see is that no one could get as extraordinarily rich as a very few people can today. I don't see how most of us can't be fine with that. Greater than I'm basically in a job that is quite important for my org, I get compliments for good job, but I hate most aspects of my daily work since the tech stack is complex and fugly. I probably appear motivated, but I'm just a neurotic who hates failing. If I didn't need to feed and house my family, I would have moved to a lower paying position long ago that is intrinsically more motivating. I too hate failing. And many times end up working extra to get things done properly. This keeps me in very different position where my manager, team relies on me, praises me, but end of day it takes toil on other parts of life. I have seen many people in my career, who just don't work, don't bother about product at all, do things at last moments, have literally zero affection for the craft and still survives in industry. I really envy them. I am grateful to have good paying job in pandemic while many people laid off. But these days what I really need is to close my laptop at 5 p.m. without any worry. Greater than I'm basically in a job that is quite important for my org, I get compliments for good job, but but I hate most aspects of my daily work since the tech stack is complex and fugly think a lot of people can actually relate to this. Imho, a good way to think about it is to consider that there's more granularity to work than a black or white I like my job, I hate my job. Maybe you dislike meetings, but enjoy the feeling of triumph after fixing bugs, or maybe it's vice versa. Maybe you enjoy helping co-workers get unstuck with your expertise despite working on a crappy stack. Maybe you take satisfaction in seeing the burn-down chart go down each week, or maybe thinking about how to be a better tech interviewer is something that interests you. There's usually _something_, even if it's a small trivial thing, that is nice about your day-to-day. I often think of it in terms of parallels to meditation. Honing self-awareness skills lets you realize small things that you might not have been aware of before. Walking to the supermarket might be a tiring chore, but hey look, I never noticed that tree blooms beautifully in March, or hey, I started to notice a small difference in my stamina, etc. You are in charge of your limited attention span, and you can choose to focus on the positive things, no matter how small, and let the rest naturally fall by the sidelines. Beyond that you are toiling, and if you like your job, it's glorious toiling like gardening, pleasing, but not important, but you love it, so it's great, or terrible toiling for living that eats your soul. How beautifully put. If you want my advice, it is simply this: look for dysfunctional companies. They're easy to recognize, because they look like pretty much the opposite of those companies everybody really want to work at. Take everything you see from a website like Elastic One, for example, and invert it. It should not be clear what the value proposition is. The website should not adhere to modern design standards, or at least, do so very poorly. Bonus points for lots of unnecessary, buzz-heavy text that does not give any further indication of what the product/service offers. Just look for any remote developer job via LinkedIn or any other place recruiters frequent and just invert what seems to be a good job and look for that instead. Approach it with your current attitude, maybe not in the actual interview, and assume that you probably won't even want to add it to your resume. I think you won't have any problem finding a role where you can get away with this. How it will affect your mental health is another question, but that's for you to find out. If you ever want to bail out, you can just drop it and fill this gap period with something else in your resume, like whatever hobbies you were busy with. For the record, I think the incredulity in some of these responses is pretty hilarious. 99.9% of companies do not care about your well-being as a person. By choosing this attitude, you're really just treating them the way they are already treating you, a disposable business partner that will be removed from the equation as soon as they are no longer beneficial for you. 1. Greater than look for dysfunctional companies. This theme is common in the thread and is wildly wrong. First, I recommend reading Bullshit Jobs to get some perspective on how others have fulfilled your goals. Big, rich, process-driven companies and institutions are the easiest to do the least work in for the longest time. Process is the toxin low effort thrives on. An admin role at Google pays more and works much less than an engineering role at a dysfunctional company. If you look at rich university departments, the admins are impossible to fire and work very little despite being paid only about 30 to 40% less than a professor with multiple postdocs working 5 to 10 times as hard. Anything in government, remember, process is where you thrive, and big rich city and state governments have incredible amounts of process. Specifically, stay away from the tech industry. 1. Look for a smaller antiquated company or department that doesn't understand IT, and has few if any in-house IT professionals. Make sure the role doesn't include user support. Look for operations jobs. 2. Look for positions that have a ton of manual work. Search for prepare daily/weekly/ etc. reports and similar job functions. 3. Automate as much of it as possible. 4. Do not tell anyone that you have automated those functions. Optional, ethical constraints. 5. Insist on working from home so you can work for multiple companies simultaneously. For what it's worth, sample size of 1, me, if you are at all competent and bad at setting boundaries, the dysfunction will absolutely frustrate the heck out of you. Seeing what is broken, knowing that it can be fixed, and having even the slightest bit of motivation or knowledge of how to do so, and how it goes on forever and ever and doesn't get fixed becomes incredibly tiring. I suppose, if you go into a dysfunctional company hoping to coast, just be aware, if you are not good at managing boundaries and passing off the frustration, it might be a lot worse than you realize. Just imagine. If you are spending 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, watching a slow-motion wreck, and powerless to do anything about it. Sure, you get paid, but is it worth spending the time? Dysfunctional companies consume effort, but they waste it. People work themselves to the point of burnout with little to show for it. What the original poster needs is a company that is already functioning without them, and does not require any of their effort to keep going. This is great advice, but if I could just add one thing, from experience, and that is, do treat the interview with dispassion. I have consistently found employers, in a dysfunctional organization, often read dispassion as confidence, and that is always a plus point. You just described my job to a T. I'm a systems analyst at a university. This was a big, demanding job when I first started. But after being here for 2 years, I've automated a lot of the complicated stuff. So now most routine tasks that took the other guy a week takes me about 15 minutes. To be fair though, the other guy was really bad. Like, couldn't even open East Manager and restart a single website. Bad. The pay is not fantastic, FANG, but it does offer a decent salary in a mid/low cost of living area. Combined with my wife's salary, we make more than enough. Also, I get a free master's degree out of it. So that's awesome. I think the takeaway here, which I've also experienced, is to get an IT job in an industry that does not appreciate IT, find a position that seems to involve a ton of manual work, automate all of it, and do not tell anyone that you have automated those activities. If you are working from home, you could conceivably do this for multiple jobs, in theory, ethical considerations aside. I'll echo this. I'm also a SA at a mid-size US university. I am completely content with how slow my job moves. We have real, actual deadlines a few times a year. The bare minimum earns you praise. I think I've done a month's worth of work since last March, which has been wonderful for my physical health. Nearly every 4-year offers unconditional tuition remission. You will be underpaid. I'd stay in this position forever if I didn't happen to dislike the location as much as I do. I ran a small infosec shop for 15 years and worked in many industries along the way. An IT job at a university was the first thing that came to mind. Not necessarily because the job is easy, because that's not always the case, but because the environments that I've been involved with at least are really chill and you stay in touch with young folks. Some university positions can be notoriously cushy. I know a few networking folks who have been in their position at the university for a solid 25 years. Kind of unheard of in the enterprise sector for the same position. My buddy worked IT infrastructure at a major public university and would work 3 days a week but spread out his deployments for the write-ups that were used to evaluate his performance. The pay wasn't great, so he left, but it was a great gig for a while. I love this question for its honesty. Frankly, if I had a job I just needed technical competence on without much thought, I'd probably hire you. Our one-on-ones would be brief and probably just be you demoing whatever hobby it is you alluded to. As long as you can crank out some decent code, I don't see a reason why a person who needs some quality work done shouldn't at least give your desired arrangement a chance. Unfortunately, right now I do need product-focused engineers, but in this case you wouldn't want to work for me anyways. Smile. This is also a great thought exercise. What jobs would be good for you? Thinking on it a bit, I think the following could work. 1. Scrum team member at an all-remote company on one of their lesser products. If you work fast, then you can probably do it in a few hours each day. 2. Maybe a small consultancy where you work on a contractual basis, just completing tickets. 3. Government. A small city council style place where you specify you need remote work and then probably the workload is minimal. I don't like the idea of being a burden on a government when there are perfectly dysfunctional companies you can find this with. It feels somewhat undemocratic, but in a pinch this might do. 4. A niche field. Maybe take up COBOL. Then you can specify the hours you work, and if the patches are minimal you can fly through them. Ultimately, the thing that might get you to this arrangement fastest is being really good at your job, so you can fly though the work. So perhaps doubling down on one field, and becoming a domain expert is the path to this arrangement. These are all speculations, and hopefully they help you on your path to your desired role. Good luck. I came here to respond to your number one and tell you I worked in that position, and you are 100% spot on. I chose to do more and grow/learn, and obviously there were times when you had full weeks and overtime, but by and large, I'd say 50% of people on my team were phoning it in and only putting in 2 to 3 hours per day. The rest was team meetings, corporate meetings, lunch hour, miscellaneous Slack chatter, etc. Thanks for the ideas. 4. Is probably what I end up doing, the niche field being some sort of DevOps, sysadmin job. While reading the impressive amount of responses this thread got, I realized I do enjoy helping other developers and generally keeping stuff working. I still end up spending nights tinkering with my Vim. It's not like I can't watch a computer anymore without puking. Good luck to you too. 5. Take your job. Essentially you're not doing any work, are you? You're looking for competent people to do work for you. Would going into management be what this guy is looking for? I'm looking for honesty, as candid as the op. I may be naive, but why would you hire someone who repeatedly says I don't care? I have no problem hiring someone who just wants to get their shit done and get the F out, and if that means they only work 2 hours, so be it, as long as expectations are clear, but they still have to care when they are working those 2 hours. Maybe I am too simplistic, but when someone tells me I don't care, I generally won't hire them regardless of whether they are product focused or not. A start would be to ignore a lot of things said about tech on HN. It is a solid source of pain, suffering and time wasting. I like it, but that's another story. Forget about all this modern tech stuff no one is asking for. You can work for companies, clients who need stuff automated. They don't care about K8s, Jamstack, React, Docker, Service Mesh, etc. etc. You can hack shit together with PHP plus MySQL, put in on a VPS, and you'll be treated like a sorcerer. Find small companies. I know a bunch in the EU, which is a good region anyway, as you have a safety net if you lose your job, and many places have 36-hour or less weeks, that are not IT companies but factories or something non-software with a small team that are working on internal software for the last 10 years. You will get tasks to fix/add on stuff. No one will be in a hurry. Factory runs fine without it, it just makes things better. Or gears up for a tax rule change or whatever. I would be careful to not get depressed by this kind of work. I nearly did, but it's not hard to find, not here anyway, if you are at least a bit social and can write code so you can get through the interview. These companies don't give you whiteboard interviews or actually any more than just a friendly chat. Medium-sized law firms, 25+ attorneys, are a good place to look. They have a lot of internal business processes that can be wrangled with some fairly simple apps. Not a single person in the whole firm knows anything about computers. Profit margins are fat. If you automate a couple things the managing partner thinks are a pitter, you'll be treated like a god. Also, law firms seems especially fearful of tech talent leaving, so I don't even really think you have to worry about a pay cut. Nice to know this stuff is out there. I really do wonder how long I'll be able to handle the exhausting pace of US tech before I want to settle down, and have kids in a society with a better social safety net and maybe a more sustainable approach to living. I think it's probably fairly random. I.e., you're just as likely to have a do-nothing job in a FANG as in some other random core. But I don't think you can start doing nothing right after being hired. Usually people are hired because there's more work in a team that the existing headcount can handle. So, you have to work for some time and then count on falling into the cracks, landing in a place where there's less work than people capable of doing it. BTW I recommend against startups, pre-big funding. In startups, the owners watch costs like hawks and there's zero chance of slacking off. BTW 2, if you're good with people, I recommend a Scrum Master role. From my observations over the years, these folks have almost zero workload and absolutely zero responsibility for anything. It's Slacker's paradise. You just have to be comfortable with babbling on meetings/calls for the majority of the day. Anything agile related bullshit job will do, really. Scrum Master, Agile Coach, what have you. SM certs are easy to get with minimal investment. A meeting here, some buzzwords there, and compile the results regularly in lengthy Confluence pages nobody will ever read. Automate much of it and maybe generate a graph or two to present during reviews. Op will have to organize retros, groomings, etc. Invent ever-changing formats. Remind everybody to stick to the rules, but don't do much else. Keeps people on their toes. At minimal effort. Have regular catch-ups with various people. They're essentially coffee breaks, but you pretend to be productive and maybe generate a protocol. Plus you get to suck up to all the important people. Bonus points for regularly posting obnoxious agile methodology articles on your company's intranet or LinkedIn. I agree with the Scrum Master suggestion. My Scrum Master pretty much just creates meeting invites for 40 hours a week. We have a lot of contracts where we have Scrum Masters just because we do Agile, usually the non-technical types do it. The irony is that Scrum Masters are supposed to not make the team reliant on them, but by having a dedicated role for it, of course the dev team will make the Scrum Master do menial tasks. If you don't mind dealing with the Agile bullshit full time, it's a DOS. Opters state, I do not want to manage people, which might go against the you just have to be comfortable with babbling on meetings/calls for the majority of the day. And being in meetings/calls can be a very taxing job. Talking is exhausting from my experience at a call center. Random may not be the right word for it, but I think you're right. Do-nothing jobs tend to be snowflake jobs, each one different. A lot also depends of what you consider work or slack. Is low attention meetings work? One good strategy might be the 1/10x programmer. Find a team that sucks, be 10x better than average. Work 1/10 as hard. Spend 2 days on 2 hours tasks, etc. As many of the stories here show, it's usually easier to grow into a do-nothing job. Build rapport for a few years and take on responsibilities that can be automated but don't tell you automated them. And slip into the legacy projects no one knows or cares about to look at but that need a little maintenance here and there. They tend to build up where you can easily own multiple products that still have to run but don't really need more than a few hours of work per month at most. Just don't document anything about them or refactor them to be easier to look at. Lol, agreed on Scrum Masters. I'd rather go hungry than be on calls all day though. I don't know about putting in the least amount of effort for 5 days a week. But what I do know is that in my country, the Netherlands, part-time work is more and more becoming the standard. Already, 75% of women and 30% of men work 32 hours a week or less. In many sectors the full-time standard has been lowered to 36 hours, which means every other Friday off. I myself started on 40 and will move to 32 hours somewhere next year. It's your right by law to reduce your hours for the same pay/hour. So my advice would be to look for remote-only dev jobs in the Netherlands, and just ask to work 24 hours or 32 hours a week. It's very common here and won't be a roadblock. Although this is going to entirely depend on how much money you actually need to get by. I'm extremely curious about this from a practical perspective. Disclaimer, American, so probably not the best work-life perspective as far as company, co-worker expectations. How does this work? Our responsibilities, work adjusted to fit the hours provided. What about being on call? It seems like something a lot of companies should be taking advantage of, but the desire to own souls fights against it. NL is a strange place to work in IT. I worked there for a little while doing consulting work. Projects were not meeting deadlines yet everybody dropped the pen at 5 p.m. sharp. I was baffled and amazed at the same time. Greater than it's your right by law to reduce your hours for the same pay/hour. Is this actually a thing? There are laws regarding this. How do these laws work if there's a job requirement itself which needs certain number of hours? Try being a product manager of a web service at a big corporation. I stopped and went back to programming because of how little there was to do. You said you don't want to manage people, but in my experience all I had to do was email calendar invites for a meeting. Show up to said meeting. State the topic, point to an engineer at random and say, "What do you think?" Zone out for the rest of the meeting, zoning back in only if it sounds like the conversation is starting to get off track. 5 minutes before time is up, say, "Okay, it sounds like we're agreed that we're going to do X." Go back to coding side projects. It's a funny job, because even though it's very easy to coast, it's also fairly high visibility, and in my opinion very necessary. Without a dedicated person to spend 30 minutes a day watching over meetings, things seem to very quickly go off the rails. This is amazingly relatable. I do appreciate the work, coordination and decision-making that PMs drive, but in practice it does not require much work. In truth though it does require a lot of meetings. Not great for a 2-hour work day.
Hey guys, this is the Rogue YouTuber here. I recently had a big change in my life. I had a baby daughter. Here she is. If you could do me a favor and remember to hit the subscribe button and bang the bell, I'm hoping to really create a YouTube channel that really gets people excited and brings people the best, most interesting content collated from across the internet. I'm saving up to save my little girl to Carnegie Mellon Computer Science Department. So please remember to like and subscribe. See you next time.